So earlier this week, I created a video talking about my own journey with slowing down. And I kind of want to continue that theme in this video or audio, wherever you're listening to it, in this session, let's call it that. And this is it's such a pivotal learning for me, I think. Wherever you found me, on the internet, I guarantee you can find me in lots of other places. So you might be watching this live on LinkedIn or Facebook. You might be watching it on YouTube, where it then ends up. You might have come across me on Instagram. I post content there too. Substack, Medium, my own website. Oh, I'm all over the place. And right at this moment, that still seems to make sense to be all over the place. Oh, and of course, I have a lot of content on Insight Time. I've not checked, but I think I might be probably one of their biggest creators in terms of content, in terms of the amount of stuff I submit to the platform. And I love it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to not do those things. But as I'm settling down and slowing down, I'm beginning to see that my intellect is running the show. It really is. And there's a lot of pushing, which doesn't feel so good sometimes now. I sometimes notice as I'm going through the day that there's a kind of a heavy feeling, a rushed, sort of a combination between a rushed feeling and a heavy feeling in my chest. And I'm tuning into that, and I'm realizing that's letting me know that I'm just going too fast. And life looks to be asking us to go fast, doesn't it? It's a bit crazy out there. And if you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, or a leader in a business, it really does look like you've got to go fast. But what if slowing down, like I mentioned in the last video, what about slowing down to the speed of life is going to help us to find a more natural flow? When you look at nature, it's going down, it's going on at its own beautiful pace, isn't it? I noticed this year in the UK, we've had a really quite phenomenal summer. And in fact, it's not carrying on in summer, but it's carrying on quite warm. We're now at the beginning of October and it's still 14, 15 degrees every day. I've known years before when we've had a serious frost by now. And it's stayed warm, it's staying mostly dry. But what I noticed was I was down in London just at sort of the end of August, beginning of September, and the leaves were already falling from the trees. Now, why? I suspect, I'm not an expert on trees, but I suspect that due to the lack of water, it's been a very dry year, not just a dry summer, dry year, the trees knew, because of their natural way of being connected to themselves and to nature, they knew that they had to do something to protect themselves. And that something was dropping leaves. So I've never really known autumn start at the beginning, with such a force start at the beginning of September. And I was walking on a regular basis in a graveyard, Brompton graveyard, near where we were staying. And the poor gardeners of the graveyard are just out every day with a leaf blower, at the end of August, beginning of September. That's different to how it can be other years. Autumn comes a lot later. And, I didn't see it quite so prominently when I came home, but to the north of England, but it was there. Like there's a moving forward of life that doesn't need any forcing. And it just seems to me that as human beings, we're so caught up in our intellect that we don't always see that. Trees don't have a lot of thinking. They're just following that nudge from nature. I guess what it might look like inside a tree is that they're following the felt sense of it. What feels right to do, what feels right when you're a dry tree that's not had very much rain and water, and the ground's feeling dry. What feels right to do is to drop leaves. And we don't always hear those nudges. My last video I talked about, not listening to a nudge and then listening to a nudge and the impact of that. And this video, I'm still creating content because I love it, and I love sharing this understanding. But it feels gentler today, I have to say. I know it sounds counterintuitive. If you're running a business and you've got a lot on your plate and you're trying to create clients and you're trying to connect with people and you're trying to, you're trying to get somewhere, then it can be hard to pause. Or if you're, busy in a business that you're employed in. One of the clients that I work with regularly just takes some time. He goes out of the office and goes to sit quietly and listen. Not to the noise in the atrium, but to the noise, to that quiet voice. Like I said in the last video, it's like a brass band. If we're busy and noisy, if we're busy, we can't not have a lot of thinking. Actually, that's the first time I've said it quite like that. If we're busy doing all the time, we can't hear beyond or beneath that mental brass band. Because in order to be busy, when we're busy, there has to be a lot of noise. And as I burnt out over 10 years ago now, that was so true. I was doing a lot in the world and my mind would never shut up. Yeah, I feel like the two are connected because as soon as you've got lots of things you're doing in the world, it's like a vicious cycle, isn't it? I've got lots of thinking, I'm deciding lots of things to do, I'm doing all those things, and I've got to therefore plan all those things, keep on top of all those things, and I've therefore got a lot to do. And and also when we're thinking a lot, we think there's lots to do. My mind often isn't quiet. It's often not quiet at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning with ideas, because it feels like I've got to have more ideas and do more. But what if the best ideas were not in a load of anxious, noisy thinking, but we're actually in calm? Like, not what if they are, really. Now, one of the things I spoke briefly about in the last video, but I really want to emphasize that is how gentle are you being to yourself? Does it look like you have to do all these things and you have to keep moving forward and you have to do them to the point where there's not space to slow down? I talk often about that journey between being led by the inner critic to being guided by inner knowing. We are so harsh on ourselves. As I say that, I can feel a well of emotion, which I'm not just going to put down to the full moon, which has happened earlier this week. But I know I'm harsh on myself. I know I push myself. And maybe you do too. Maybe you can relate to that. But I'm also seeing more and more that as I slow down, that creativity, that clarity, and that right action, that aligned action just materialize naturally. And then there's less to do. Like, for me, there's just then less to do because there's just a following of a nudge. It's not doing more. It's doing less from presence? How many times today have you paused, taken a breath, and given yourself a moment to just align with, I don't want to say decide because that feels very intellectual, but align with the next thing you're going to do? Like, what if you did just pause now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just sit in the comfy chair, as Michael Neal tells us to do. Take a breath and see what comes up to do. And follow that. Like I spoke about in the video that I made earlier this week, on Tuesday, I think. 2 examples of, times when I hadn't listened to that voice, the quiet, the voice that's like a piccolo underneath a brass band. And times when I did, and seeing how things just work out better when I follow that intuitive nudge, when I follow the inner knowing rather than the noisy old inner critic. So I hope that's been helpful. It's been helpful for me. It must be because I'm having a cry. So I always know things have worked out well when I'm having a cry. Yeah, just find some space to pause. The lovely George Cow, who I do lots of learning with, talks about his energy reboot is just reconnecting to yourself. And when I say yourself, I don't mean your noisy intellect, just pausing and listening to yourself a little more. That the quieter part of you. Because true productivity is born from aligning with that, not just doing lots of things. And I'm on a journey with this so much now. So perhaps you'd like to join me on that journey. And if so, there'll be some way to connect with me around here somewhere. You can drop me a message, or find your way to my website to book a clarity call, and let's see where we go with it. Thank you so much for being here today. It's always a pleasure to share this stuff. I hope it's helpful. Lots of love.